There is a crow outside right now, somewhere near you, that has stood over a dead body and made a decision. Not a reaction. Not instinct. A decision. It looked at the body. It looked at the other crows gathering nearby. And then, based on criteria that researchers are still trying to decode, it either stayed, or it left. Because here is what science has just confirmed, after a decade of field research, controlled experiments, and arguments inside ornithology departments that got uncomfortable fast. Crows hold funerals. Not metaphorically. Not in a way that looks like a funeral if you squint. In a way that has now been documented, replicated, and published in peer-reviewed journals, with one detail that no one saw coming. They are choosing who gets one. Not every dead crow gets a funeral. Some bodies are ignored completely. Some trigger gatherings of 50 birds or more. And the difference between which crow gets mourned and which crow gets nothing, that difference tells us something about crow society that researchers did not expect to find. Welcome to Bird Whisper. Subscribe before you leave, because what you are about to learn is not a metaphor, not a feel-good nature story, and not settled science. It is an open question sitting at the edge of what we thought we understood about animal minds. And by the end of this video, you will never look at a crow the same way again. Stay until the end, because the final thing we cover is a behavior documented only 18 months ago, in a single location, that has not been fully explained. Researchers have a hypothesis. But the hypothesis raises a question that is harder to answer than the original one. Let's start with what the research actually shows. In 2012, Kaeli Swift, a researcher at the University of Washington, began a study that started with a simple question. What do crows do when they find a dead crow? She expected avoidance. Maybe mild alarm. She did not expect what she found. When crows encountered a dead crow, they gathered. Not one or two birds. Groups. Sometimes 10, sometimes 25, sometimes more than 50 crows arriving within minutes at the location of a single dead bird. They would land near the body. Circle it. Call loudly in patterns distinct from their normal alarm calls. And then, they would stay. Not for 30 seconds. Not for 2 minutes. For periods averaging 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes longer. Swift called this behavior a cacophonous aggregation. The crows were not mobbing a predator. There was no predator. They were responding specifically and exclusively to the presence of a dead crow. But here is where it gets strange. Swift's team repeated the experiment across different crow populations, different locations, different seasons. The behavior was consistent. Crows that had never met each other, crows from different territories, crows with no established social relationship, all showed the same response. Something about a dead crow was triggering a hardwired, species-wide behavioral pattern. And then Swift's team asked the next question. What happens after? After the aggregation ended, after the crows dispersed, Swift's team tracked what happened to the locations where funerals had occurred. The crows avoided them. Not temporarily. Not for a day. 4 weeks. Crows that had participated in a funeral aggregation at a specific location returned to their normal territorial behavior everywhere in their range, except at that location. Even when food was present. Even when the location was central to their daily movement pattern. The experience of standing over a dead crow had marked that space as dangerous in a way that overrode hunger, habit, and territorial instinct. Think about what that means. A crow saw a dead crow. It participated in a group response. And it updated its internal map of the world, flagging a specific coordinate as a place where death happens. It carried that information forward in time, integrating it into every future decision about where to go and where not to go. That is not reflex. That is not simple conditioning. That is learning from death. But Swift's research opened a door, and behind that door was a question that nobody had thought to ask yet. If crows respond to all dead crows, why are some bodies ignored? In subsequent years, as more researchers entered this area of study, a pattern emerged that contradicted the early assumption that crow funeral behavior was universal. It was not universal. Field observations and controlled experiments began documenting cases where a dead crow received no aggregation at all. The body lay where it fell. Other crows in the area showed awareness of it, they altered flight paths, showed brief alarm responses, but no funeral occurred. The question became, what is the difference? Researchers identified several variables. The most significant one was social rank. Crows live in complex social hierarchies. They have dominant individuals, subordinate individuals, pair bonds, family units, and extended social networks that researchers are still mapping. And what the data showed was that crows with higher social status, crows that were more central to their group's social network, crows that had more established relationships with more individuals, were significantly more likely to receive funeral aggregations than socially peripheral birds. The crow that mattered more to more other crows got the funeral. The crow that was isolated, subordinate, or recently arrived, often did not. Dr. Swift was careful in how she described this. She did not call it a decision in the way humans make decisions. But she also did not call it random. In a 2018 paper, she described the pattern as socially structured mourning, a response that scales with the depth and breadth of the relationships the dead individual had maintained in life. The crow that built more relationships got a larger response when it died. Sit with that for a moment. Because what that implies is that crows are not just responding to death as an abstract stimulus. They are responding to the death of someone they knew. Someone whose absence registers differently than the absence of a stranger. And that is a very different thing. Let's talk about what is happening inside the crow during a funeral aggregation, because the biology is as strange as the behavior. When crows encounter a dead crow, researchers have measured elevated cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone, in the observing birds. Their heart rates increase. Their vigilance behavior spikes. They are not calm. They are not simply curious. They are physiologically stressed. Research from the University of Cambridge on Corvids social cognition suggests that this stress response is connected to something called third-party social awareness, the ability to track and care about relationships between other individuals, not just relationships that directly involve yourself. Crows know who is friends with whom. They know who is paired with whom. They track the social landscape of their group constantly, updating that map as relationships shift. When a crow dies, other crows are not just registering the loss of one individual. They are registering a change in the entire social structure of their group. A pair bond has been broken. A territorial partnership has ended. A hierarchy has shifted. The funeral aggregation may not be grief in the human sense. But it may be something functionally similar, a group recalibration. A collective acknowledgement that the social map has changed and that the group needs to update its understanding of who is where and what the new arrangement means. But here is the detail that stops researchers cold. During funeral aggregations, crows have been observed bringing objects. Small sticks. Pieces of grass. Occasionally, food items. And placing them near the body. This behavior has no established survival function. It does not protect the body. It does not deter predators. It does not benefit the dead crow in any observable way. It benefits nothing. Which means if natural selection has not eliminated it, if it keeps appearing across different populations, different environments, different social groups, it is either a byproduct of something else, or it serves a function we have not identified yet. Neither answer is comfortable. In late 2023, a research team conducting long-term observation of a crow population in the Pacific Northwest documented something that had not been recorded before. A crow funeral, followed by what appeared to be deliberate exclusion. During the aggregation, 2 crows arrived at the site late. The group had already been gathered for approximately 8 minutes. And the crows that were already present, actively blocked the late arrivals from approaching the body. They physically positioned themselves between the new arrivals and the dead crow. When the late arrivals attempted to move around them, they were met with aggressive posturing, wing displays, and vocalizations distinct from normal territorial aggression. The late arrivals eventually left without reaching the body. The researchers observed this pattern repeat across 3 separate funeral events in the same population over a 6-week period. In each case, certain individuals were prevented from participating. And in each case, the excluded individuals were birds that had been documented in prior observations engaging in conflict with the deceased crow during its lifetime. The crows that had been enemies of the dead crow were not allowed at the funeral. Let that land. The research team is careful. The sample size is small. This is a preliminary observation, not a confirmed finding. More documentation is needed across more populations before any conclusion can be drawn. But the hypothesis they are working with is this. Crow funeral aggregations are not just a response to death. They are a social event with social rules. And those rules include, at minimum in some populations, a judgment about who belongs there. Whether that judgment is based on relationship history, social rank, or something else, is what they are trying to find out now. Here is what you should take from all of this. Crow funerals are real. They are documented, replicated, and peer-reviewed. They involve physiological stress responses, socially structured attendance, object placement with no survival function, and in at least one documented population, apparent exclusion of enemies. What we do not know is what any of this means from the inside. We do not know if crows feel grief. We do not know if they understand death the way humans do, as an abstract concept, as finality, as loss. We may never know. Because the interior experience of another mind, human or crow, is never directly accessible. What we know is what they do. And what they do, when one of their own dies, is gather. They call out. They stay. They remember the location. They bring things. And sometimes, they decide who is allowed to be there. Whether that is mourning, or something we don't have a word for yet, is a question that will keep researchers busy for years. But the next time you see a group of crows in a tree, quiet, oriented toward the ground, not moving the way crows usually move, look closer. Because something may have just happened that you are being allowed to witness the edge of. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen crows gather and stay in one spot in a way that felt different? A way you couldn't explain? I want to hear exactly what you saw. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.